Hello everyone and welcome to another video here in the channel. Now, this is a topic that was quite heavily requested from the last video, which was show us the bakes. Show us how we can transform this from a very sort of like heavy high poly mesh into this one right here. So if you haven't seen that video, last video, I showed you this model that was sent to us by our good friend Benjamin, who did a great job on the modeling, but it was a little bit too heavy. Well, not a little bit, quite a bit too heavy. Almost 300k triangles. And in this video, I'm going to show you the final things that I'm doing to transform this into a sub 3k triangle mesh, which is this one right here. I'm going to show you the UV process, and then we're going to go into Substance so that you can see how this whole optimization process helps us quite a bit to get to this point right here. This is not like finalized textures, we still need to do that. So yeah, let's jump right into the optimization process. So I'm in the final little bit that we are fixing. As you can see, this is the result that we have so far, and I just need to fix this final part right here. Now the cool thing is we were able to bring this all the way down to 4k triangles, and we could even optimize this a little bit more. I'm being a little bit, let's say, lenient and trying to keep most of this detail. But for instance, all of this element right there, like that whole loop, it's not changing the silhouette too much. So again, we can just collapse it, and that's gonna save us a couple of hundred more. We could even do this with this border right here and just collapse that. That's gonna save a couple of hundred more. So yeah, now very important, this little cap right here, I did delete all of the back faces right here because the player's never gonna see them, right? Like how often are we really gonna bring the camera all the way to this side and see that stuff? Not often, right? Like it's not something that's very common. So we can definitely simplify that a little bit right there. Same for all of this ones right here. Like if you take a look at the high poly, you're gonna see that this thing is sort of like embedded. Let me grab the low poly here. Just Control G, let's hide this a second. There we go. So you can see this thing right here is kind of like embedded on this thing right here. So all of that extra faces that are inside the element, we don't need them. We're never going to see them. So that's where you really need to be very mindful of and be like, hey, if we're not going to see these faces, might as well just delete the whole thing right there. Oh, there we go. And delete all of these inner faces, right? We just leave it like a little bit of a lip right there, and that's all we need. I might not want to do that with all of them because, as you can see, we do see some of them here on the underside. So again, it's just a matter of deciding where we want to remove stuff or not. But that's where you can find a couple of extra triangles that you can safely remove. We have this volume right here. As you can see, I triangulated heavily. You might need to triangulate a little bit more. So for instance, here I used a bevel. So we have an angle right there. So I might need to just add a couple more triangles here on the corners so that we don't have any more angles. This is very common in assets, especially in assets that are not going to deform. If you're doing characters, that's a whole different story, okay? Have a whole series about that, like how to retopologize characters for proper animation and stuff like that. But for hard surface stuff, doing this, it's called stitching. It's perfectly fine. What you want to avoid is having any n-gons, because as we know, n-gons can mess up topology. And I know we're gonna get a huge debate. This is another one of those very contentious topics about whether n-gons are gonna kill your game or not. It's not that they're gonna kill it, but most engines prefer to work with quads and triangles, so you might want to keep it that way. You can see that I did something similar here on this little hinge, and this is the final part. So this element right here, as you can see, it's very heavy. Now I don't really mind having too many divisions on the cylinder. It's again relatively fine, but I do mind having this extra bevels right here because it's such a small piece that you're never ever gonna see that. Now, will that give you a cleaner bake? Yes, and we're gonna take a look at bakes in just a couple of minutes now. But it's important that you understand that we don't need all of these extra divisions. A lot of the things that our good friend Benjamin here used are things that are recommended when you're doing subdivision modeling, and the last video actually got a lot of comments about that, like, oh, this would work perfectly fine for a film or something like that. And it's like, yeah, for stuff like that, sure, you can go really heavy, but even then, you really want to optimize whenever you can. So for instance, here on this cylinder, it might not be a bad idea to, again, select every other edge loop that we have right here, and then just delete it. Just delete that one. So we go from a 16-sided cylinder to an 8-sided, or from 20 to 10-sided cylinder, and that's going to save us quite a bit of elements. Let me see if the plugin that I was wanted to show you last time works on this donut. So if I select one edge and then skip one, and we go to bonus tools, there's this modify. At that point, oh no, now I remember. It's 1 and then 2, just the edge, not the whole ring. Bonus and then modify. And modeling, select every edge loop. There we go. So as you can see, now I've selected all of the loops. And what we can do here is there's an option on the display options here, on the selection options that just it grabs the continuous edge. This one. There we go. So now I can easily just delete those, and we delete the element. So again, 1, 2, bonus tools, Then modeling, select every and edge loop, so it selects every other edge loop right there. And then we go select and continuous edge, and we delete all of those. Oh, seems like it did not select that one for whatever reason. And that one, let's do that again. There we go. So as you can see, we simplified that donut into a very, very simple mesh that, again, we're never going to see. Again, even like this inside element, let's just delete that one. It's going to save us a lot of another one. Even that one right there might, that one I'll keep. So there we go. So we were able to bring this down from, I don't know how many polygons we had, to this very simple poly loop right here. So now if we take a look at our whole poly loop, let's just assign a very basic like bleed material. People were asking me, like, oh, make sure to change the material because that one's too light. We can't see the edges. I don't know what it is with Maya that changed the default material to something that's a little bit brighter, but there we go. So now what I want to make sure here is that we don't have anything like looking wrong. So let's select all of the objects in object mode. I'm going to go mesh display, unlock normals, just to make sure that we don't have anything. Delete history, phrase transformation, center pivot, just again, cleaning everything. And there we go. We're at 2,724 triangles. So under 3K for this element. And we're capturing all of the silhouette from our mailbox right there. Now, some of you might be like, oh, but we're not capturing the letters. Well, the letters are not part of the silhouette. If I press number 7, you never see the letters sort of like poking out. So we can capture that in the normal map. All of that can be baked down with all of the amazing like welding. Well, actually, I actually got some comments on TikTok about welders who said like, that's a very horrible weld. I'm not a welder. I'm pretty sure Benjamin is not a welder either. So this is sometimes what we can do, but it's always a good idea to research, and if we're going to do something, make sure that we get all of the details as nice as possible. So let's now jump onto the UV section of things. So for UVs, I'm going to use the method that I've shown before. I've shown this everywhere here in YouTube, the tutorials everywhere, which is the 5 steps to good UVs, right? So I'm going to go here UV, and I'm going to delete UVs, first of all, to make sure that we don't have any UVs on this object. And then I'm going to say UV, and we're going to do a just very basic camera base mapping. This is just so that we have a UV set, right? So if we go here to UVs, we have something to work with, but it has no seams, except for those that are sort of like empty. Actually, we can go here. Let's reset current workspace. There we go. So we can go to this section right here, which has like the model and the UV editor and all of the UV tools over here. So it's a little bit easier to work. And I normally, when I'm working with this, I do like to change or to use a little like UV checker. If you don't have a UV checker, it's very easy. Just go for UV checker. That's this one right here. This is an excellent site. This is UV checker by Vinci. XYC, and it's an amazing tool. And the cool thing is it has a couple of presets. I really like this rainbow one because it has colors, it has letters, and it has a very nice sort of like rounded bevel. So I'm just gonna download this. There we go, and we just load this one. So what we want to make sure here is that when we're doing our UVs, of course, we keep the textile density nice and clean. Now, a lot of these objects are very simple, like for instance this one. Now here's a cool trick about square elements like this one. You want to cut the corners. Okay, so you're gonna select this corners right here. And if you cut those corners, yes, we're gonna get extra seams. That's part of this or like the process. Let's cut there. But when we unfold, things are gonna be way straighter. And usually with texturing, we can use things like triplanar mapping and things like that to make sure that those elements are not as obvious. So we hide those elements, because otherwise, if I just like unfold this normally, there's gonna be a lot of stretching going on those elements, and I find that to be a little bit more like damaging. Cylinders are my favorite thing to UV because they're so simple. You just cut one line on the cap, so it's cap, and then you go to one of the bottom sections right there and you cut there. And when you unfold both of this, you should have like a very nice strip. Control U, there we go, and this thing. If you get like the Pac-Man, just sew that back together and unfold just that island with Control U, and you should have like a very clean cap right there. Now, for this one, you do want to straighten them up if possible, or when possible. Sometimes if you have like, I don't know, like belts or things like that, it gets a little bit more complicated, but it's relatively simple. You just grab the whole island, and as long as it's close to being straight, you can use this straighten option here under the unfold option. There we go, and there you go. As you can see, it gives us a very nice result right there. So, cool, we got both of those ready. So that's the that one and that one. What I like to do as well, and I don't have my layers over here. Where's my channel box? There we go. Let's dock it right there. So on the channel box, I like to create a new layer, and I'll just call this UVs ready layer. There we go. And I hide that layer. And anytime I finish doing the unfold for an object, I'll just right click and then add selected objects. And that way I can know which ones I'm already like done with. This one, as you can see, it's a very sort of like organic shape, so it already has no cap on the other side. Control U, and that's it. Nothing else that we need to do right there. that should work perfectly fine. Let's go here again, right click and add selected object. And finally, we got this very big cylinder right here. Now, there's a couple of schools of thought on like big cylinders like this one. Some people like to split it into multiple parts. I think for this one in particular, it might be a good idea to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to UV and then 3D cut and sew UV tools. Let's go back to normal mode so that we can see what we're doing here. So UV, 3D cut, and we're going to cut that line right there. So this section of the mailbox, there we go. You can see that it changes color. It's very, very important that you have your tools enabled so that when it changes color, you know that you're doing the proper cut. I know that the material right now is very bright. I'm sorry about that. I really have no idea how to change this. This is part of like Maya's like stuff. You can try changing like the color things, but there we go. So that like upper element right there, everything else remains pretty much the same. And then back here, I might want to like split it right here. I believe that's where the concrete stops. And of course, the cap, it's another one right there. And we want to go to the back side of the element, so it will be like right here, and go across on all of them, on the islands, on the cylindrical islands, right? On the caps, we don't need to do that because they're more like cylinders. And there we go. So Control U, and this is what we have. So this long section right here, this one right here, this one right here, cap and cap. Now, I don't mind having a little bit of curvature on this one. I know we can straighten it up, but again, I don't mind it. If you straighten things up, yes, you're going to have a better layout. But sometimes, especially with complex shapes like this, just straightening can cause issues. In this case, we were quite lucky, so that worked nicely. This one, I'm a little bit concerned, because as you can see, this is where we have the little like element right there, the sort of like, what's the word? The little hinge right there. It might not be a good idea, actually, to go here into the hinge and remove that hinge from the UV. So that one, if it's not letting you, you might need to go and do this manually. So I'm going to just select the 4 edges that make up that hinge and then say cut. There we go. And then easiest way is also to cut sort of like the inside part of this thing. There we go. So cut. And probably also the caps. Yes, I know this is going to give us extra edges and extra cuts. That's going to allow us to have a clean bake, which is what we're going to be doing next. There we go. Now we just grab this elements, Control U. That's it. That's much better. Now, one trick we can do for this part right here is actually to use some of the other UV methods. So if I grab that UV shell and say UV, and then I do a cylindrical mapping, you're going to see that this cylindrical mapping is actually already doing it the way I need it to do. Now, don't unfold again, because if you unfold again, you're going to get the same error. So what we want to do here is just sort of like, you can eyeball this, just grab the UV shell and make sure that things are like properly like calibrated, right? So just like scale this in such a way that you get square like sections, right? It's usually going to be at least one like whole square here on your UV map. There we go. So something like that, and then we can push this a little bit smaller, so they're as square as possible. So that right there is the UV for this section. And with that, we pretty much have the UVs for all of the sections. So if we take all of the elements right here, all of the UVs are ready. The only thing that we're missing is that they're not properly laid out. So I'm going to use modify and then a layout option. And there's a couple of things that I like to do, especially with, again, like mechanical stuff like this. I like to do a shell pre-rotation to horizontal, so they are all sort of like straight, similar to the way that we did the UVs. And it's very important to do a shell pre-scaling to preserve the 3D ratios. So the size of each shell should be the exact same size as everything else. We're missing one more bit though. Small little bit right here. So that little guy right there. This is a very simple one. So the cylinder, right, it's empty on the top, so we only need to do UV, really cut in UV, and so UV tool. We can cut like the little cap here on the bottom, and then one line going on the inside. There we go. And for the torus, it's just putting one line on the inside, and then one line across. If we do that, Control U, there we go. We get the shapes ready. So that should be more than enough. Now that we are, again, ready, we can grab all of the elements right here, and by using the little tools that I show you here on the layout option, we can just lay them out. Now, very important, this is something that a lot of people like forget about. We're going to do this bakes at 2K. And we definitely need to have a little bit of shell padding, which is the distance between the shells and the border. And we need to have a little bit of tile padding. Sorry, shell padding is the distance between each shell, each UV shell, and tile padding is the distance between the borders of the element. If you leave this at 0, layouts are gonna literally have them one on top of the other. And when you downrest your textures by using mip maps, we use this in games and in movies, you will get a little bit of bleeding between the elements. So you don't want that. Always have a little bit. 8 and 8, I always find to be like a good option here. So I'm gonna hit apply and look at that. Very, very nice. If we take a look at the UV resolution, you're gonna see that every single piece is sharing the exact same sort of like a UV resolution, so that's great. And now, if you wanna really nitpick everything, you can go here and, for instance, I can see that this plate right here, or this one right here, no, this one right here, it's rotated a little bit weirdly, so I'm just gonna rotate it so that the numbers are facing forward. Same for this one, I'm just gonna rotate it so that it's facing forward. There we go. We can move them a little bit. This one right here, that seems about right. I mean, it's the base, so not too much of an issue. This one we can also like rotate it a little bit. There we go. This one right here, which is the box, we also want to sort of like rotate it so that the numbers are facing in the right direction. This is like being really, really nitpicky about your UVs, but it's gonna like work fantastically for your presentation. So that's it. Now, can we optimize these UVs to be even more optimized, right? Like, is there a way to make this guys even more like tightly packed? Yes, but as you can see, we're using quite a bit of like a good distance on the whole thing. And later on, if we want to add another element, like maybe like a letter, right? This is a mailbox, so we can add a letter right here, like a couple of letters. So it's fine. Like when I tell people to utilize their UVs properly, it's not that every single pixel has to be like maximized to maximum potential. It's just make sure that it's nice and clean. We can't really make this any bigger because right now this island right here is what's telling us the sort of like a resolution. But if we take a look at the texel resolution, and you can see this here inside of Maya by going into the transform options, there we go. For a 2048 map, if we're getting a 4.8 texel resolution, which for like a third-person game is, I would say, fine. For a first-person game, you usually want to aim for something like a 10 texel resolution, so we might need to push this to a 4K like map to really showcase all of the elements. But again, 4.8 texel or pixels per unit is fine. If you're going to be doing a lot of close-ups, then yeah, you're going to be using UDIMs, or you're going to be using a lot of textures and stuff like that. But again, 4.8, 10 is usually a good number for like a third-person, first-person game. If you're doing like a very top-down view, again, similar to League of Legends, you can even go lower, like an RTS, like Age of Empires or StarCraft. You can go even way lower because units are going to be very, very small on the screen. It all has to do with how far or how close things are going to be on the screen. But you can see here, like we're using a 2K map, and we need to get really close to start seeing the pixelation. Like at this distance, perfectly fine. Okay, so now let's jump into baking. Very well, my friends. So for the baking process, there's a couple of things we need to do. First of all, I like to select my element right here. In this case, our our mailbox, and I'm gonna set mesh display to soften edge, all of them, so that we have soften edge everywhere. Yes, we're still gonna have like this sort of like weird triangulations there, but that's what the normal map is gonna help us fix. It is possible to harden some edges to keep things a little bit tighter, but I'm just giving the basic overview. There's more advanced baking techniques that we can look at later on, but I want to keep it simple for this sort of like first video that we're doing on this topic, or one of the first ones that we're doing. Now, as you can see, the interaction or the connection between this element and this element will have a hard edge. That's a hard edge that's going to be a little bit difficult to hide even with normal maps, because yes, the normal map will bake the welding point, but you are still going to see a little bit of a line. There's ways to erase that line or blend it, add dirt, textures, or other stuff in there, and we're going to be able to get a little bit of that. But just keep in mind that that's something that could happen. If we combine both objects and we do proper edge loops and everything, we can minimize that effect as well. It all depends on what the purpose of the object is going to have. So you're going to grab your high poly. In this case, I combine everything into a single piece, and you're going to grab your low poly as well, and you're going to combine everything into a single piece and export. So I'm going to open here Substance, and I'm going to start a new project. And that Substance is one of, I think, the best bakers out there. I don't think it's exactly the best, but it's definitely one of the simplest, right? There's more or other bakers that we can use to generate a very nice result. Like Marmoset has a really good one. If you want me to show you a little bit of that, let me know in the comments, and I'll be happy to do that. But for now, we're just going to use Substance here. So I'm going to do OpenGL, 2K, PBR, are, like nothing out of the ordinary, and we're just gonna load in our low poly, which is right here. Remember, this is a very low poly, just 3K triangles, but even with 3K triangles, we have all the little details right there. So there we go, everything is smoothed out, everything is looking clean, we got our low poly ready, so we're gonna jump to this section right here, which is the baker. And on the baker, the only thing we need to do is bring in our mailbox high. And when we do that, what's going to happen is we're going to get this. This is called a decage. And decage is going to analyze all of the things that are floating around our element, and they're going to bake those things down. Now, you can modify this gauge. We can make the frontal distance a little bit less intense. And as soon as it goes into a point where, hey, we're not going to be able to catch those details, it's going to turn red. That's why I really like Substance as a baker, because it really very easily tells you where things are going to be, again, baked or not. So I'm going to push this just a little bit more until we get this sort of like blue area here on the post effect, and there we go. Everything seems to be working nice. There's a little bit of a bold there that we're missing. Not too worried about that, because if we push this too much, what's going to happen, or what could happen, especially here on this little elements right here, is that we're going to get things baking into other elements. So that's why it's an interesting balance here on how far or how like not far you want to push things. So I'm going to keep it like that. And I'm going to set a couple of options here. Anti-aliasing, I recommend having at least 4K. If you can go for 16K, that's great. 64K is going to take a long time. It's worth it if you have the time, but it's not going to make that much of a difference. Now, very important thing here. Look at this. We got 2 texture sets. That's a mistake. I made a mistake when exporting things, and for whatever reason, this things that I'm exporting right here, or this one right here, has like an extra part right there that I forgot to delete, it seems. So I'm just going to delete that. There we go. And I need to make sure that this object only has a single material. Very, very important that it only has a single material. Blend 1 in this case. I'm going to say File, Export Selection again, Mailbox Low. And if we go back to Substance, you don't need to start everything again. Just go to Project Configuration, pick your mailbox again in this case, and hit OK. And there we go. Should only be one material right there. We go back to the baker, and we're going to bake all of these, all of the elements. So here, I'm just going to hit Bake Selected, and there we go. All of the textures are getting generated, normal map, ambient occlusion, thickness, everything. And if we go back to our paint layer, this is what we see. Now, it got generated and it looks a little bit pixelated, right? I don't love the look of it. Why did that happen? Because I forgot to change the output size to 2K. So, there we go. Now, why does it look pixelated? Why do we not see this like details as sharp as they were looking on the high poly? And the reason is because when you bake, you are constrained to the textile density of your object. Remember we talked about this? So this thing right there, as you can see, this post sign right there is constrained to only this area of pixels. So from a whole 2K map, that area right there is constrained to a small little portion. So even though we have a lot of detail on the high poly, we're not going to be able to capture all that detail because the amount of space that we have right here, it's not ideal. Here's again where you can make technical decisions and be like, hey, what if I go back to my UVs and, well, this is the border, like the bottom part. What if I make this a little bit smaller and I make this a little bit bigger because I want to have a little bit more detail on that part? You can totally do that. Just keep in mind that by doing this, you're breaking an important rule, which is the textile resolution rule, which is now things are not going to have the exact same amount of polygons. But this is done. We do this in games every now and then. For instance, head, faces, hands, they usually have a little bit more texture resolution because that's the things, or those are the things that we see the most. So you can totally do that. Just keep in mind that that's going to break, again, one of the rules about textile resolution. But again, you are not going to be seeing this asset at this distance. Most of the time, we're going to be seeing at this distance right there, and you can see how nice and clean it looks. So that's it, guys. Once we get in this point, now we go through the whole texturing phase. I'm just going to do a quick machinery like element right here, which gives us a very sort of like a basic effect. Let's go inside of it. Let's go to the metal base and set this to like a red color. There we go. And as you can see, we can very quickly start just like playing with all of the tools that we have. As I mentioned, the line that you see there on the welding, that's the overlap that we have between the between the box and the welding. I don't think it's like an extremely like horrible thing to see, and as you can see with texture it gets hidden. The only way to solve that is by either creating a like weird normal movement on the faces or just merging everything together. Like if we merge everything together and we soften that edge, it could be with a boolean and then just triangulate everything. That's fine. It's also going to increase a little bit on our poly count. But hopefully with this video, guys, you get a nicer idea on how we can like deal with these elements. Let's just add a quick thing right here. Everyone loves a little bit of metal edgeware, right? So let's just add like this metal brush all the way on the top. Add a black mask, right click, generator, and we're gonna add a very cool metal edge generator. There we go. So, of course, I've shown you tricks before on how to blend this and make it look a little bit nicer, but this is just a quick example on how we can take a very, very heavy asset, the 300K like asset that we have with this Leal post, and simplify it, optimize it for a game. This is ready as soon as we finish texturing, of course. This is ready to be brought into Unreal, Unity. This could work perfectly fine for a VR game because it's less than 3K triangles, it's a 2K texture, and it has a lot of details that people are going to be able to appreciate while in game. Again, in the game, you're probably going to see it at this distance. So, yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. This is the end of this little, like, student assistance that we are inaugurating. I think people have been responding, and you guys have been responding quite nicely to the video. So, if this is something that you want me to do more and more, where I take someone's work and I show you how I would, like, improve it or modify a couple of things to make it more efficient or better, let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to do so. Don't forget to tune in this Friday. We're gonna have our traditional live stream on Friday. Make sure to join our Discord channel, and of course, if you want to support this project or learn more about the 3D world with our premium courses, you can find the link down here. That's it for me, my friends. Sorry for my sore throat. I've been sick for the past couple of days. Hopefully that did not make this video any like a wrong or any worse. So yeah, thank you very much, and I'll see you back on the next one. Bye bye.